Right, this is the bit I find most exciting, installing the servos. We've got a bag of bits unlabeled, but this is basically step 6 from the manual. In this bag of bits we've got some self-tapping, I think they're Phillips head screws. We've got some mounting plates for offsets, we'll see if we need those. And we've got some very nice plastic moulding here now to take the self-tapping screws in, and these are way and above the most substantial blocks that I've seen for this purpose. We've also got some M2 bolts and nuts for securing these ball links onto the servo arms. I'm going to be using the Futaba servos I've had for a while, the BLS 451 on cyclic, the 251 on the tail. Haven't decided about the gyro and the throttle servo just yet, but maybe I'll get inspiration as we go. There's our BLS 451, nice looking servo. For some reason they haven't stuck the nice bling on the side. In terms of arms, they're recommending 11mm radius. Our aileron servos are going to go in the front cutouts with the control output furthest to the front, which is quite handy because it then means that the servo wires are pointing to the front to go directly to the receiver. One of the things you've got to do with your servos is just to check the height, and what you have to do basically is have a look and see how the servo squares up. Get a ball link, that's obviously going to go onto the bell crank here. Not a really tight bell length, I'll have to resize that. But have a look, see if you're going to need to pack out the servo with the spacers. See whether you're going to need to mount the ball on the outside or the inside of the control arm. It's going to be almost perfectly parallel to the frame side, mounting the balls on the underneath, so that's what we're going to try. That's probably best because there's going to be control wires going from the control push rods rather, from the elevator servo down here to the elevator bell crank, and we don't want these to foul these control links, so I think probably under on this one and over on the other one. It's also worth noting that these cranks set the precedent of the Bobby Watts Special and the later T-Rexes, in that the output arm is longer, roughly 2 to 1 than the input arm, so we're going to get a greater cyclic output for our servo input, which just gives a bit of a snappier response. I eventually settled on these Futaba 6 spoked horns. They're quite good in that you can adjust them and get very nearly square where you want to be. One useful tip is if you've got a servo tester, and this is Cliff Tech's beautiful little servo tester here, which we've featured in Bob's Helitech room, you can center up, which basically sends a pulse down of 1500 microseconds. That centers up the servo, so without all the radio installed, you can see where center stick's going to be and pick out your position on the servo and your holes accordingly. So I'm picking out the second hole here, which is just about 11 millimeters. I think it's really important to pre-drill these. If you can force a 2mm M2 bolt down these, but I think that's going to put an undue strain on the horn. I think it's going to render it more liable to split. So we're going to use these M2 bolts and the servo balls supplied, the ball links supplied, and mount those up underneath here. And I'll do the same for the other side. Now here's the heli with the elevator and right aileron servo installed. Not a big deal, they fit very nicely, no problems with the cutouts or the drillings of the hole, they're very precise. They're located by the self-tapping screws into the carbon holes. In actual fact, they were a very solid fit into the carbon, and I personally didn't think that I was going to use these little plastic nuts to go on the back, because they fitted so solidly in there. They're really, really well in, and I put some CA on the nut threads where it meets the carbon just to be sure, but I don't think they're going to come loose, but I'll keep an eye on that. Anyway, they don't show these plastic nuts in the manual, but it's up to you whether or not you use them. This is the way that they're assembled. Basically, the aileron servo push rods go to the bell crank underneath the elevator one.
I used you have to use a standoff on here because you've got an opposing aileron servo on the other side, and certainly with these BLS 451s there's no room to fit these servos in unless you've got spacers, so you have to fit spacers underneath this servo. Having fitted a servo underneath there, a spacer underneath there, I then put the ball links underneath this horn here, 11 millimeters out, as per manual. And then to get the elevator push rods not fouling, I had to use 2 spacers underneath this elevator servo down here and mount the balls on the outside. And if you look at it from above, bit of a difficult picture to get. There you go. There's the frame side there. There's the elevator push rod, and underneath that there's the aileron push rod down there. And you can see these are all parallel with the frame, which is how it should be. Now that meant that when we got onto the other side, down here, we've got some similar arrangements here with the aileron servo. But because we've got no extra elevator bell crank here, I felt that you wouldn't actually have to have a standoff on here, except for the fact you're going to be butting up against the servo on the other side. So I was run out of standoffs by now, so I had to get some out of the spares box. I actually used some aligned carbon fibre plates, and with about 4 millimeters of standoff down there, that push rod also nice and parallel with the frame. All that remains then is to mount up your throttle servo. That's the way I've done it. There's you could put the push rod at the bottom if you wanted. I didn't actually have to have a spare push rod available for this, so I had to go robbing the spares box again. But that's the way I set it up. That's at mid-stick. Incidentally, as we mentioned before, good trick if you're going to be setting up the servos on the heli. A servo tester like this high-tech, absolutely invaluable for setting up midpoint and getting it all square without having the radio installed. So that's well worth having just for that. Okay, it's nice having all the servos at one end, I must say, because all your radio gear is coming out, all your servos are coming out for the radio gear, which I'm going to mount down on the receiver tray down here, and that's all very compact. The only one that's going to need an extension is the rudder servo. Rudder servo, very straightforward, mounted with self-tappers into the mount. I found I had to mount it as far forward, butting up against the boom case as I could, to accommodate the length of the push rod, but that's no big deal. I mounted I'm going to use a Spartan DS760. This is the third I've had now, and I've had mixed results with the other 2 I've had, but seeing people rave about them so much they can't be all bad, so I'll give it another try on this one. Hope I don't regret that. Okay, the only extension I'm going to have to put on is an extension here to mount up with all the servo electronics in the front, but I used again 11 millimeters out on a star wheel. In actual fact that was a bit more, that's about 15 centimeters out. This tail actually takes a lot of travel, and to get it to the limits with about 60 degrees, that's the distance out I took, but I'll be checking the limits of the gyro to see if that's about right. Incidentally, while we're on the tail, there is an aluminium alloy pulley upgrade I discovered in the bottom of the box. Obviously I haven't fitted that just yet. I'll see how we go with the plastic, but I think it's probably going to be the go to fit the alloy one based on T-Rex experiences. At the front I'm going to be using a Spectrum AR7100R receiver. I'm going to mount it on some foam and Velcro like that. Fits in there pretty neat, and I'll probably put the satellite receiver on the front with this little antennae mounted right angles to this vertical one down there. So we'll do a bit of tidying up of the servo wires. Shouldn't be too much of a big deal. The sensor from, get it in view. The sensor from the back plate on the crankcase cover for the rev limiter, I've put some shrouding on because it's going to be in a mucky area underneath the receiver, and I've also put a glow extension down there. We'll probably just cable tie these down and run these up. While you're in the frame of mind for running cable, go over the areas of the carbon with some wet and dry and round off all the sharp edges where cable's going to be otherwise near. Apart from that, I've put some tubing on there. These little alloy pipes have got very sharp edges on there, so again I took some wet and dry and just rounded those on. Don't want holes appearing in our fuel lines in mid-flight. And the vent I fed through to the back.